Okay, this is video number 29. Yeah, friends but not friends. I think back to when I was recruited, which was January 1995, many years ago. And also when I was recruited for the second time, that would have been April 2011, version 2 of the cult. That was ICOC originally, then ICC in 2011. So friendly, most people like friendly people, but what if the friendship isn't sincere? Then yeah, it leaves a bitter taste in the mouth, doesn't it? If you think somebody's your friend and they're friendly, but they're not actually your friend, they've got an agenda. Another way of phrasing it is bait and switch. Bait and switch. So I got recruited into a cult. I'd left uni, I'd started work, and life was good. Then I was at this shopping centre one day, and this guy persuaded me to visit his church and go to a Bible study. That short interaction, the interaction that changed everything in my life. 20 years wasted in a cult, mental breakdowns, ruined my life. And it was a very short interaction, at that shopping centre, Prince's Mead, Farnborough, many years ago. So he was friendly, he was brainwashed into thinking if you're not part of their group, then you're going to go to hell, and they want you to go to this place called heaven. So they're very sincere, but they don't really question what they believe. Is it true? Can you prove there's a heaven or a hell or a God or a devil? It's what I find fascinating with people is a lot of people are more bothered about getting you to believe what they believe than actually question is what they believe true or not. When you actually think about that, there's so many beliefs out there, false beliefs, prejudices, against people. Oh, you're a tall person, you must be this way. Oh, you got a different colour skin, you must be that way. All these illogical prejudices that people have. But that aside, it is this use of people being friendly. That's a kind of common theme, isn't it, around the world? If you meet somebody out of the blue who's friendly, these days I guess you have to, most people are fairly sceptical. What are you trying to sell me? And sadly that is the world, the way the world operates is people will use fake friendship to sell you a mobile phone, to get you to sign up to their charity on the street. Friendship. Isn't it sad that, you think you're meeting a nice person, but they're not really. They've got this agenda, a hidden agenda, and yeah, I wasted 20 years of my life. You don't get those 20 years back again in a cult. Now, were a lot of the people in the cult friendly people? Sort of. But there was always the agenda. You couldn't separate just being a friend from the agenda. And yeah, it's so sad that I think there's so many people in cults that think the other members in the cult are your friend. But if you say or do the wrong thing, then the leader will kick you out or shun you. And a lot of people, do have mental breakdowns because they've been shunned, they've been lied about, and all of that kind of stuff. And it's very traumatic that somebody else decides who you can be friends with. You know, in a cult, you know, if somebody leaves, the general idea is don't talk to the person who's left. They've turned to the devil. You know, so you can't even put your situation, whatever happened, to address any issues. And I think that's where a lot of people go wrong. They think, well, if I talk to the leaders, we'll put things right. No, they don't care about right or wrong. They've got this scam that they use to recruit people to make them money. It has to be exclusive doctrine. Otherwise, somebody could go somewhere else. They have to be friendly or they wouldn't recruit anybody. They have to say they're the only ones or you wouldn't give them all your money. You know, there's a certain dynamics in cults that it just has to be that way. The recruiters have to be friendly or you wouldn't join. It has to be a unique salvation doctrine or you could go somewhere else. You know, it's actually really simple when you think about it. The way I was conned, the guy didn't know what he was doing. He knew he had, I guess he knew he had to be friendly or, you know, he wouldn't get people along. But the indoctrination process or the brainwashing really is the devious part. You know, you can't have friends outside the group because they're going to hell. They'll turn you over to the devil, you know, kind of thing. And this is when it's very confusing, especially for young people. Like when I was young, in my 20s, I thought they were my friends. I thought they were Christian. I thought I could trust them. But it's always this agenda. And sometimes people compromise. They say, oh yeah, I know I need to bring people along. I know I should give more, but I'll stay for the sake of friendships. And that's pretty sad because they're not your friends. I watched a couple of videos from some Jehovah's Witnesses in their senior years in life, old, you know, shunned from a wife, shunned from kids, shunned from people they knew their whole life because they suddenly woke up to the brainwashing and they suddenly realised it was all a load of nonsense. You know, I mean, when you think about it, it's very devious because they're using friendship, cult experts call it love bombing, to get people to join, and then there's the indoctrination. If you still want to be friends, then you have to believe this stuff, or you can't be a friend. And sadly, a lot of people compromise on that. You know, I mean, it is what it is. Some people in cults, they say, oh, I don't feel loved. You know, because there was all this love bombing to get them in. And then it's like, well, hang on a minute, everybody was really friendly. Now they've just moved on to the next person. Yes, you see it for what it is. You were loved into the group, but you are just a pawn to be used to lure other people into the group, and the group thinks they're the only ones going to heaven. It's the constant brainwashing and the constant turnover of people who just realise, hang on a minute, you have to feel sorry for the people who don't realise what's going on. And for me, that was 20 years. 20 years I didn't figure it out. You know, I mean, to literally be under the spell of a cult for 20 years. And some people, it could be 60 years, 70 years. And then they realise it. And the realisation comes along. Hang on a minute. And the realisation could be, is this true or not? I wonder what other people say. As soon as you think, I wonder what people outside of the group have got to say, boom, that's it. You'll be out soon. And of course, in a cult, there are these people who realise, okay, if I want to be noticed, if I want my name mentioned at the pulpit, I have to bring people in, you know, and if I want to be popular, I've got to do this, that and the other. And some people, it's almost like they're completely amoral, without morals or without ethics. And it's like, okay, if I do this, then I'll get friends. If I recruit somebody, then I'll get a girlfriend. If I recruit another person, maybe I'll get married. You know, and it's, for some people, that reality is the only reality they know. They've never questioned the ethics or the morals of how the group grows. Worse if they were born into it, you know. So that's today's video. Yeah, and then the indoctrination and the manipulation, in hindsight, it's obvious. You know, in hindsight, you can look back and think, why did I believe all that crap doctrine? Because you were in a group of people and they all believed it. That's why you believed it, because you're surrounded by people who believe it. You know, and therefore you question your sanity, not their sanity. But the fact is, I mean, in a lot of cults, most people leave anyway. And then the ones that stay behind, oh, we're the true believers, you see. These people who left, they fell under Satan's spell. But with Abrahamic religion or Christian or whatever, it's this, they believe in this God in the sky that they can't prove. They believe in a heaven and a hell that they can't prove. They're frightened of a judgment day because there's plenty of judgment on earth to be frightened of, you know. And you know, in the world there's injustice and there's corruption and the elite are very oppressive. And then that same dynamic plays out in cults. I mean, I look at America these days. Stephen Hassan wrote a book, The Cult of Trump. Very well worth reading, because America is under this cultic dictatorship, almost like the Nazis were in the 1930s. And yet they don't see it, and they think it's normal. And people brought up in that world, you know, young people, they might think, yeah, if I want to get rich, I throw my morals and ethics out the window, and I lie and I flatter and I deceive and I con, just like the president, you know, or Putin or whatever. So yeah, it's the fact that there's a lot of people that don't have ethics or morals. It doesn't mean anything to them. They're more bothered about money and popularity or being an influencer. The truth doesn't matter. The only thing they obsess with is money, narcissism, and being worshipped.